We are back and we're talking about some wrestling lessons. And this was one that Peanut Gallery and I talked about. And I'm like, ooh, that'd be a fun wrestling lesson. I want to talk about the World Bodybuilding Federation, the WBF. So it started in 1990 and lasted until 1992. And this was Vince McMahon's big non-wrestling project that he really wanted to work on, but it just didn't turn out. So it was a subsidiary of Titan Sports, which is why everything was under Titan Sports, so he can jump from one thing to another. Right. You know, as businessmen like you and I, that makes sense. We have a general entity, but we have DBAs, and that's what this was. Mm-hmm. Now, the main competition for this is obviously, still to this day, the big guy, the International Federation of Bodybuilding. In 1990, McMahon initially denied that he was starting a bodybuilding organization, instead stressing that he was only starting a magazine called Bodybuilding Lifestyles. Right. He hired famed bodybuilding personality Dame Platz, if I butcher any of these, I apologize, to oversee the publication. So, good choice. Yeah. Obviously, a good personality to know what to put into for people who want to read that material. Mm-hmm. And if he did that, great. But here's the problem. The magazine secured a booth at Mr. Olympia, which held its February 15th, 1990 in Chicago. Mr. Olympia is the big guy, except for maybe the Arnold Classic. Mm-hmm. And I think that's held in Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. Tom Platz asked if he could do a speech unbeknownst to the Weber brothers, who ruled the IFBB with an iron fist at that time. Okay. Platz used this platform to announce he turned to a new dawn of bodybuilding. That's what he said. And he announced the World Bodybuilding Federation in that platform. They had no idea what he was going to do. Obviously, they were pissed. They were annoyed with this upstaging that Platz was given. He was lifetime ban. He got a lifetime ban from this announcement in 1990. At the conclusion of the competition, the booth held out press releases announcing the WBF's formation, because this was the biggest talk at that event, because this was such a big thing. This is a very famous bodybuilder announcing a brand new federation on the biggest platform of the WWE of bodybuilding. This is essentially like if Don Callis came in and announced Impact Wrestling on Raw. Right. Or even at WrestleMania. It's that big. Right. And I don't think people realize that, and especially in the 90s, bodybuilding was huge. Mm-hmm. And it's still big now, but this was right at the end of Arnold Schwarzenegger's really big reign, so it really got a bunch of interest. Right. Now, the first event was held at January 30th, 1991 at New York's Plaza Hotel. All right. And they signed 13 competitors, many IFBB regulars and long-term contracts, such as Aaron Baker, Lex Luger actually was in this as well. Okay. The eventual winner of both tournaments that they held for bodybuilders, Gary Seidam, who was a huge prospect for the World Bodybuilding Federation, or not the World Bodybuilding Federation, but the IFBB at the time. So that was a big get. That was essentially signing Kenny Omega to WWE at the height of his popularity. And Johnny Menard, I could be butchering these. And they were dubbed WFB Body Stars. Just an FYI. So that was the event of signing everybody. Right. The first actual competition was June 15th, 1991, live on pay-per-view in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Regis Philbin was the co-host with McMahon, and Bobby the Brain Heenan was there too. Obviously, it was moderately successful because they got a lot of really big names. But at the end of the day, I guess the announcing was a big thing that kind of killed it, because people are like, these guys really don't know how to do this. You can't, once again, you put WWE personalities into this with no actual knowledge of the product, you're not going to do well. So,
sounds like another product that was out
right.
later.
To promote the show, they had the Body Stars and WWF Superstars appear on the series of Family Feud.
Okay.
Which, in the 90s at the time, Family Feud was all that in a bag of chips. Right. The results left much smoother and less rippled competitors than what the IFBB showed. So they were actually smaller. Right. And they weren't as defined. Right. Because what they really wanted to push here, they wanted to bring in he brought in top nutritionists who advocated more of a keto diet pre-competition. So this is a high-fat, low-carb, low-protein diet. Right. So the body mass is, ironically speaking, smaller than what they generally do because he wanted to promote the healthier version of bodybuilding. Huh. Yeah. And he did the same thing with the XFL. It was a much safer game. Right. Because with kicks and everything, but that's maybe a story left for another day. On the weekend of, now we're going to go forward, on the weekend of February 1st and 2nd of 1992, McMahon announced the ultimate personal fitness weekend in which fans could visit the WBF headquarters to learn and train with the then champion Gary Seidlin, Mark Quinn, Eddie Robinson, Jim Quinn, and others. So really, this was a precursor to what we know of as WrestleMania Access. Oh, okay. Except that these fans could get dietary advice, train with them. There was a lot going on here, so it was actually very interactive and very ahead of its time. Because remember, this is early 90s. I would think if this happened like 1999, maybe the perception would have been different. Now, in the second show, McMahon made a deal with Lou Ferrigno to have him as a competitor. Okay. And he was billed as the legend Lou Ferrigno because, in bodybuilding, it's fucking Lou Ferrigno. Right. And a contender for Gary Seldon's WBF champion. Okay. At the appearance date approached, McMahon and Ferrigno could not reach a final agreement, and the appearance was scrapped. That was probably a really bad idea. Right. On June 13th, 1992's competition was broadcast on live pay-per-view in Long Beach, and this is when Lex Luger was scheduled to participate as a guest performer, but was involved in a motorcycle accident prior to the event because Lex Luger became really popular at that time because he still had that WCW thing. Right. So, he was instead interviewed via satellite during the live pay-per-view broadcast for this. Right. I think he injured his leg or something, so he couldn't really do anything. It had a low buy rate at that event, and Vince McMahon called the owners of the IFBB on July 15th, 1992, and announced that the WBF was disbanding. Right. Because, they created a lot of that bad publicity. Right. And we saw this very similarly with the XFL when they badmouthed the National Football League. Right.
I see a lot of parallels between the XFL and the
WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation.
Yeah, a lot of parallels.
A short time later, McMahon was indicted. Now, this is why. In July, this is when McMahon was indicted on charges for
steroids.
This is when the steroid trial happened. So they do believe that he was going to try to distance himself from a industry that had a history of abusing steroids, so he would not be hurt for this. Right. So really, this is still one of the maybe not as long things of wrestling lesson with Tiger Height. But I think what we saw, what I was really interested about this was the parallels that they did with the World Bodybuilding Federation to other McMahon ventures.
Like the XFL.
With the XFL especially.
That's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind.
Right, because, well, you're right, because they badmouth the main people. Yeah. And, you know, when you're trying to build a federation and the fan base is the fan base that you're badmouthing of the main product, why would they watch you?
Right, exactly.
Now, there are a couple of things in this that I actually did enjoy. They told their competitors, I think like a month and a half before the IFBB, about them being competitors in certain competitions, so they actually had more time to prepare and more time to rest. Also, I thought the top nutritionist for a keto diet is actually a really good idea. And also, McMahon was in talks at this time to bring in female bodybuilders as well.
Which was another revolution in the industry.
Right. So really, you get a best of both worlds here. You get, you know, McMahon trying to do something outside, but he was still very far ahead of his time. And that's something, at least, even though you think McMahon is an idiot, you have to appreciate. The man is a very forward-thinking guy, and he has been. He has a track record of this stuff. Even with the XFL, the camera angle with the wire, that was an XFL invention. They didn't have punters. And that was something that the NFL has been talking about getting rid of for the longest time, but McMahon actually never did it. So really, I think it's just kind of an interesting little thing there. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about reviewing and doing our reactions from...
Are we going to do both parts?
We're going to do both. We're going to do both parts. We'll do both parts of Hiroshima, and then we will do NXT TakeOver.
All right. Let's get it done.